Have you ever noticed how, like, local politics, the stuff happening right in our backyards, can sometimes be even more dramatic than a national scandal?
Oh, absolutely.
Like, you can't turn away.
Yeah.
We're diving into one of those stories today.
Okay.
Sumaira Waqar, a politician from Waterdown, Ontario, is facing, well, I guess you could say, some pretty intense public scrutiny right now.
And what's interesting here is that this isn't just, hearsay or rumors swirling around.
Right.
We're actually looking at a series of blog posts that meticulously document, they really go into detail, about these alleged discrepancies in Waqar's public record.
So we're not talking about opinions here. We're talking about someone who sat down and did the work.
Yeah, they're really trying to connect the dots.
Okay, so let's get into it.
Let's do it.
The blog's biggest red flag when it comes to Waqar, campaign finance. They're alleging that her final expense report, which was a suspiciously exact $1,400, and this complete lack of personal contributions, it just doesn't, kind of seems like something's off.
Yeah, and, campaign finance regulations, especially in Ontario, this is something that a lot of people don't realize. Business contributions are banned here. And the reason these regulations exist is to, really guarantee that there's fairness in elections. So it's to ensure that elections aren't being influenced by those with the most money. Right?
It's about keeping it level.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when someone's report seems to contradict, like the usual hustle and bustle of a campaign, where are the costs?
Yeah.
It raises questions.
Makes you go, And speaking of costs, the blog also points out these potential unreported expenses. Like, they were talking about professionally printed materials, things like dual-sided T-shirts, lawn signs, which definitely aren't cheap.
No, those things add up.
And that's not an insignificant cost, right?
No, not at all. And that's the thing. These allegations, if they're true, this could be a sign of a deliberate attempt to go around those financial regulations we were just talking about. And that just really erodes public trust.
It makes you wonder, well, if they're hiding this, what else are they hiding?
Exactly. Transparency in campaign financing is, it's crucial. It allows the public to understand who is backing a candidate and if those contributions are influencing their decisions once they're in office.
Because that's a big concern, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's about understanding where their allegiances might lie.
Yeah, it's about knowing that they're representing the people, not special interests.
Exactly.
So even though these allegations seem to be about something as, I don't know, I guess mundane as T-shirts and lawn signs,
right,
it could have some serious implications.
Oh, for sure. These little details, right, they could point to a bigger pattern of disregarding the rules, and that can really have this domino effect, leading people to question the integrity of the whole system.
Wow. Okay, so this isn't the only time that Waqar's transparency has come into question. The blog also talks about her nomination for the YWCA Women of Distinction Award back in 2023.
Oh, yes. An award with a lot of, prestige, right?
Yeah.
It's meant to highlight really impactful contributions to the community.
Exactly. People look up to these women.
Yeah.
But the blog is saying that Waqar's initial nomination, what was included in that nomination, had inaccuracies about her roles with the Hamilton Police Force and her position as a school council co-chair.
Okay. And this is where things get even more, I guess you could say, more complicated.
Yeah.
According to the blog, while these inaccuracies were eventually corrected, those corrections only happened after other people outside of her team, raised concerns.
So it took public scrutiny for them to address these inaccuracies? That's kind of, if it hadn't been caught, it makes you wonder what kind of precedent would that set,
It really raises a big question about accountability. This wasn't just, a casual oops moment. This was an official nomination for a prestigious award. Whether it was on purpose or not, it makes you think about her commitment to truthfulness, especially when it comes to how she presents herself to the public.
And it's not just about her, right? The fact that these concerns came up around an award like this, an award that's supposed to represent something so positive, it kind of muddies the waters.
Yeah, it does.
The YWCA Women of Distinction Award has this certain weight to it.
Absolutely.
It implies a certain level of integrity, of community involvement, and when those values are called into question, it casts a shadow not just on the person, but on the award itself.
Exactly. And, in this day and age where everyone's watching, these kinds of situations can be so damaging whether they were intended or not. It makes you wonder about, how thorough was the process in the beginning? Was something missed?
Were things really checked?
Right. Was it just an oversight or was there something more,
It really does make you think about how these things get past, all those checks and balances.
It's definitely something to consider. And speaking of things being checked, the blog doesn't stop there. It also raises some eyebrows about Waqar's online activity, or actually maybe more about her lack of online activity or her missing social media, I guess.
Oh, right. This is where it gets really interesting because we're living in this age of digital footprints now, right? Like nothing really disappears on the internet.
Exactly. And according to the blog, Waqar, she had a history of posts that sparked some controversy online. Like there was at least one post that people saw as confrontational, even unprofessional. And here's where it gets really intriguing. Instead of facing the music, addressing those criticisms, maybe explaining her side of the story, it seems like she just wiped the slate clean, deleted her entire Facebook profile.
Wow. It's like she just hit the eject button on the whole conversation. I mean, she has every right to control what she puts out there online. I get that. But when you're in a position where public trust is so important, deleting your profile, especially when there are questions circling, well, it sends a pretty strong message, doesn't it?
It does make you wonder, what was in those posts that disappeared? Remember those campaign finance questions we were talking about? Well, the blog claims that some of those deleted posts, they suggested she had support from businesses for her campaign, which, hold on a second, that goes directly against those financial reports that seemed a little off.
Wait, so you're saying there could have been some pretty important evidence related to those financial allegations, and now it's just gone?
Well, it's impossible to say for sure, of course. But the timing of deleting her profile, it's definitely a little suspicious, right?
Yeah, just a tad.
And honestly, it speaks to a bigger issue that we're seeing a lot of these days, especially in politics. There's this attempt to control what people are saying, to control the narrative by erasing anything that could be damaging. But a lot of times that just makes things worse, makes people more suspicious than they were before.
Totally. It's like trying to cover up a stain by dumping more paint on it. It just makes this big mess. And this situation, it brings up some pretty big questions about being open and honest, about transparency, and about how we make sure that our elected officials are being accountable, especially in this digital world that we live in. I mean, think about it. Deleting your social media, it's kind of like a public figure just refusing to answer questions from reporters.
Yeah.
It just makes you wonder, what are they hiding?
Exactly. It really undermines that public trust we were talking about before. And it can even seem like they're trying to avoid being scrutinized.
Yeah.
And this is where the heart of this blog really comes in. This isn't just about Sumaira Waqar. This is about something we're seeing a lot in local politics, this idea that being transparent is optional.
So how do we, as people who care about this stuff, as engaged citizens, how do we make sure that the people we elect are held to a higher standard? How do we make transparency the expectation, not just a nice to have? It's almost like we need a whole new rule book for how this stuff works, because the old one just doesn't quite cut it in this digital age. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's tricky for sure. And it's not enough to just, follow the rules on paper we all out, to actually create this culture where people are expected to be open and honest, where they're accountable for what they do and what they don't do.
And it's not easy, right?
Not at all.
Because it feels like that instinct to just delete something, whether it's a post online or a whole section in a financial report, that can really do some damage in the long run.
Oh, absolutely. It erodes that trust we were talking about. And once that trust is gone, it's incredibly hard to get it back.
Yeah.
And this situation with Waqar, even though it seems really local, it impacts all of us. It reminds us that we, as regular people, we have a responsibility to stay informed, to ask the tough questions, and to expect more from our elected officials.
And we can't let ourselves be fooled by what we see on social media, because it's easy to get caught up in it all. But sometimes those things that seem small, like deleting a post, that can actually be a sign of something much bigger going on.
Absolutely. And it highlights how important it is to really think critically about the information that's out there these days, to be able to spot when someone's trying to control the narrative and to demand transparency from those in power. Don't just take everything at face value. You have to dig a little deeper look for evidence and be wary when it seems like someone's trying to hide something.
It makes you realize that even though we're living in this world where everything's online and hyper-connected, sometimes the truth takes a little work to find. We can't just passively scroll through our news feeds. We have to be willing to go beyond what's right in front of us.
Exactly. And remember that a strong democracy depends on people being involved and engaged. Don't underestimate the importance of things like asking questions, showing up at town hall meetings, and making sure your voice is heard. Those actions, even if they seem small, they all contribute to creating a system where people are held accountable. And that ultimately strengthens our democracy for everyone.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Sumaira Waqar's story, we want to leave you with this question. When it comes to your local representatives, how much importance do you place on transparency and how they behave online? And how can you personally help create a political landscape that's more transparent and accountable? These are questions worth thinking about no matter what side of the political spectrum you're on.
Because when it comes down to it, trust and transparency, those are the foundations of a healthy democracy. And building that democracy is something we all have a part in. It requires us to pay attention, to think critically, and to hold those in power accountable.
This deep dive into the story of Sumaira Waqar was truly eye-opening, and we hope it's encouraged you to think critically about transparency and accountability in your own community. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and be sure to check back for our next episode where we'll be tackling another intriguing story from the world around us.